Hello everyone, my name is Heidi Bailey and I'll be presenting today my proposed wildlife management plan for Lake Sidney Lanier in Georgia. The Lake Lanier project is owned by the United States federal government. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers put in charge of construction and management. Construction began with the Beaufort Dam, which was put in place on the Chattahoochee River. The lake project was fully functional by 1958 for its authorized and intended purposes of flood control, navigation, hydroelectric power generation, water supply, recreation, and fish and wildlife management. The Corps of Engineers and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources manages and works together to support the wildlife and management objectives with the primary focus on enhancement and protection of project areas that support wildlife populations. As you can see, the lake itself is very dendritic and it's got many tributaries and a large shoreline. The Lake Lanier project site includes over 39,000 acres of lake with 700 miles of shoreline and 18,000 acres of adjacent land, which is zoned for recreational parks, campgrounds, limited development, and protected habitat area. The Beaufort Dam is located at the tip of the lake project, approximately halfway between Atlanta and Athens. River tributaries cut deep ravines through rugged terrain to create islands and a unique irregular shoreline. So it's got pretty significant topography features. The northern forested terrain of project area is characterized by more of an older growth hardwood and pine mixed forested area with shrubby understory. The more southern ends are primarily pine forest due to disturbance. There are small portions of project area that are classified as wetlands, about 1,400 acres, and open meadows, about 2,300 acres. So topography changes from north to south project areas affect the soil composition and plant communities. Land use changes and agricultural disturbances have had over the years a major impact as well. Most of the soil in project area comes from weathering of underlying rock strata. The most common soil types found are Madison, Cecil, and Passolate series. These are composed of sandy and clay loam, considered pretty deep, well-drained, and moderately permeable, common along ridges and side slopes in the Piedmont uplands, which is where the lake is located. So northern clay soils typically support that mixed forested deciduous mixture, which is your pines, oaks, beech, maples, hickories, ash, sycamore, and other kinds as well. The southern pines are mostly loblolly, shortleaf, and Virginia. The wetland and riparian areas are found with red maple, black willow, green ash, American elm, water oak, and black gum. And then your open areas, if they were left to go through succession, would be red cedar, sweet gum, Virginia pine, and sumac. So here's a map of the entire lake zoning allocation and the property lines. The red is your recreation area. The yellow is your protected area. And that's where I'm focusing my habitat improvements on. So we have a more zoomed in map on the upper left, gives you an idea. The dam itself is circled in red, and the recreation is more of a pink on this map, but it kind of gives you a more close-up zoomed in image of those allocation, zoning, and property lines. The right-hand image is going to be for land cover. As you can see, forests still cover a lot of the landscape, but there is a large development area in red as well. I'll be focusing on 4 species of concern. We've got the northern long-eared bat. It's listed as federally endangered, found in those mixed pine and hardwood forests. They migrate to these forests in the summer to give birth. They feed at dusk, primarily through the understory of forested areas, so that's the kind of habitat they like. They roost during the day in bark cavities, crevices of living and dead trees and snags, and they eat a variety of insects. The red-cockaded woodpecker is also listed as federally endangered. It's got a very narrow range in the southeast United States. It breeds cooperatively within habitats that include mature pine forests primarily. They don't like a whole lot of understory. They carve out nests from live tree cavities, feed on arthropods, and they prefer, like I said, these old growth pine forests for roosting, foraging, and nesting. Now we come to the pool sprite. It's an aquatic annual herb. It's also listed as federally threatened. It's found in flat bottom pits, vernal pools with relatively deep water for and full sun. They also like granite outcrops with gravelly soil. So two different kind of styles. They require wet environments for seed germination, no matter where they are. The eastern bluebird, as most of you all recognize, is found year-round in the southeast United States, feeds on mostly insects, fruits, and berries. They like to nest in natural cavities such as dead pine or oak trees and generally produce one brood per year. They prefer the habitat of more open meadows, low ground cover, little understory, kind of patchy vegetation or woody edges for perching and roosting. The overall property goal of the Lake Lanier project is to maintain and enhance habitat for continued recreation and aesthetic purposes while supporting a diversity of wildlife and plant species. Management objectives for wildlife include managing mixed hardwood deciduous forested areas to increase abundance of northern long-eared bat populations by 10% through protection of preferred habitat. Objective 2 is enhance and manage old-growth evergreen pine forests to create quality habitat for the reintroduction or attraction of red-cockaded woodpeckers. Objective 3, manage inland wetland zones of coves and granite outcrops to increase biomass of native pool sprite populations by 10% through the improvement of preferred habitat. And Objective 4, manage open meadow areas, edges for sustained native bluebird populations through maintenance of preferred habitat. Now, it is wise to understand that the balance and trade-offs among property objectives as determined by the federal government regarding the purpose of the Lake Lanier project. Heavy recreation by the public, for example, must be considered when developing plans and action items for habitat enhancement in specific areas with high traffic. The multi-use aspect of the project does create that extra layer of complexity when you're proposing habitat and wildlife management improvements. For the purposes of this plan, improvements will only be designated in protected area zones to help alleviate those pressures. My management recommendations are divided by vegetation class. For the deciduous mixed forest found in the northern parts of the project area, protection is top priority. The target species in this area is the northern long-eared bat, who requires large old-growth trees with a thick understory. Pup season is April through October, so tree clearing should be avoided, and that includes any excess bark snags, dead trees, dying trees, debris. All of those things are very critical for nesting and roosting habitat. They also require canopy closure and mid-decay state tree snags for roosting and foraging. Maintenance of adequate understory and overstory can be accomplished through selective ecological thinning of vegetation to promote growth of native maternity and roosting tree species. Preferred tree species include beech, silver and red maple, black cherry, green ash, black locust, and elm. I'm also recommending installation of artificial bat boxes or drilled cavities to increase maternity potential. Recommended site improvement location is within an 80-acre tract of protected land known as 4 Mile Creek. The old-growth mature pine forests that are located in the southern project areas, the priority should be to mimic natural disturbance regimes for attracting red-cockaded woodpeckers. These southern pine forests are in close proximity to development, so prescribed burning is too risky. In these situations, mechanical removal can be an alternative that's effective as well. Use of a dozer or a skidder is recommended for the thinning and continued maintenance of understory vegetation growth. Targeted herbicide application should also be used directly in conjunction to delay the sprouting of invasive species after the mechanical removal. The target species also has responded well in the past to artificial nest boxes and man-made drilled tree cavities, which is a great way to attract breeding groups to a new location or to retain individuals that are relocated for the purposes of establishing a new colony. Recommended site location is within a 25-mile tract of protected land known as 6 Mile Creek. Now we have the riparian and wetland zones where improvements can be made that help species like the pool sprite to thrive. Excess erosion in recent years has decreased the depth of the small tributaries and coves and pools to undesirable levels. Thick, overstory canopies of water-tolerant trees have created low light conditions. Recommendations include dredging and deepening of pools and coves, thinning overhead canopy vegetation in those coves, along with prescribed burnings on the granite outcroppings that they like. Recommended site locations are within a 30-acre zone of protected land known as Lula Bridge. Lastly, we have open and edge habitat. Bird species such as the eastern bluebird thrive in maintained open meadow areas of patches of vegetation and woodland edges. Recommendations center around avoidance of plant community succession. Regular bush mowing of open areas is recommended to keep vegetation low and prevent the establishment of woody growth. Dietary supplements are also recommended, so planting of fruit and berry vegetation such as serviceberry, elderberry, and flowering dogwood. Recommended site location is a 10-acre strip of land that's pretty close to the Buford Dam that is designated as protected herbaceous grasslands. As far as measurements of success, success of the wildlife management plan will be based on abundance of target species at the end of the evaluation and monitoring period. Wildlife abundance surveys will be conducted prior to the initiation of project activities and will continue each year for 5 years. The plan will be considered successful if by the end of the 5-year period, the northern long-eared bat population increases by 10%, the establishment of one cooperative breeding group of red-cockaded woodpeckers, increase of pool sprite biomass by 10%, and the sustained population of eastern bluebirds. As far as the schedule of management activities, I've got it divided into seasons between now and the middle of 2029. So we have in the summer a species abundance survey each summer. And we've got in the fall the installation of the woodpecker boxes and the bush mowing. Then the wintertime I've selected for the thinning and removal and burning of the vegetation areas. In the spring, we've got the planting in the open meadow, the dredging of the wetland coves, and then the targeted herbicide application of invasive species in those pine forests. And then I added in a possible introduction of red-cockaded woodpecker breeding pair for the spring of 2026 in case nothing has occurred by that point. So we have lastly the budget. It basically goes per acre, and it covers the span of the 5 years. It does not account for offsetting costs of selling any mulch or tree debris, and it does assume that hiring is done from an outside contractor. So it's pricey at $86,000 plus labor. Here are my citations.